This is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Nikhil Henani, who's the managing director at Apollo Finvest. Nikhil had earlier led products at Hotstar and was an early employee at Coupon Dunia, and he was also a co-founder of PharmEasy. Nikhil was an alumni of Carnegie Mellon. And thank you to Adit Podar from Gamer Capital for introducing me to Nikhil. Welcome to the show, Nikhil.
Hey, amazing to be here. Happy to have us being introduced by Adit.
Awesome. A very interesting background because you're a CEO at Apollo Finvest, but before that, you've led products at Hotstar, and you also co-founder of a large tech company which is PharmEasy, and now you've gone back to Apollo, a company, and you leading a fintech company. What led you to get into startups, and what made you start Apollo Finvest now?
Yeah, really, super interesting question. So, my journey really started back in 2011 once I graduated from CMU. The plan was always essentially to come back and, head back and sort of, do something in the Indian ecosystem. That was always an attraction when I kind of went there. And going there, I would say, was pretty life changing. There are few moments in your life where you look back and you feel like there are things which really change you, and I think CMU was one of the one of the moments where I would feel definitely was life changing, because I ended up meeting colleagues over there who were just honestly inspired in life and wanted to kind of go ahead and make a difference, and really very very talented individuals. And that kind of really inspired me. In fact, even till this date, right, like the CMO ecosystem in Bombay, in fact, like is so large, right? And it's so funny. I had about five odd roommates at CMU. Three of us living at one point in time in different kind of times during the semester, and all of us have come back to India and started companies, right? And all of us are working in the startup ecosystem, which is fantastic, right? Like Dhruval Sanghvi is basically the founder and CEO at Loginex. Pankaj Chadha was and is the founder at InVideo, and of course Hardik basically is one of the co-founders at Dial Health, which is one of the largest distributors in the pharma space in India.
Interesting.
So I guess super inspiring bunch to be a part of. And obviously after that, my journey was basically I came back to India, wanted to kind of get into the startup ecosystem, was one of the early team members at Coupon Dunia. I met Samir, and it was a pretty cool interview to have. I do remember, we spoke about actually playing FIFA, and that was one of our favorite games on PlayStation, and we kind of hit it off, talking about those things, and it was kind of a fun place to go to work, basically because I discovered Coupon Dunia honestly one day while I was ordering Domino's when I was back in India, and I was just typing Domino's coupons, and I saw Coupon Dunia being one of the top 3 links, and I was like, this site looks interesting. So I joined that company, right? And I yet remember when I joined, my entire family was like, and the website looked pretty bad, at that point. I mean, it looked like a really bad college project in one line, right? And people actually told me this in my family that, what are you joining this funny sounding company, Coupon Dunia? It looks like, college project, which would probably get an F, by the professor. And I was like, it doesn't really matter, because I felt confident of, the people that I was joining. I felt confidence in Samir, and obviously that was again a very crucial point in my career, because it was like, it was the first time I ever got to, really experience how do you, manage something. It's almost like, I always say this, like when you work in an early stage company as a early stage team member and not a founder, I feel it's a fantastic experience, as long as, the founder is somebody that you can learn a lot from, because it's almost like, I feel it's all of the, there's a lot of reward without necessarily all the risk, right? Because there's a lot of pressure being a founder, and the weight of the world is on you, because if it doesn't succeed, there's investors, there's team members who are, you feel like, their future kind of depends on you in certain ways.
Exactly.
But, being an early team member, you kind of get to experience a little bit of being a founder, and kind of learn from their mistakes and learn from obviously their strengths as well, right? So that's, I would say, in a way, Coupon Dunia was like training wheels for me about how do you do the best stuff about how do you do the best things right in a company versus what are certain things you should avoid. And I think that's where we got the importance of culture and what it really means to have like a really A plus team. And before that, obviously you read a lot of books and everybody tells culture is super important, but
Correct.
until you feel it, you don't know what that means, right? Culture is such a vague word. Obviously, Coupon Dunia was wildly successful. I think uh, we got timing really right, right? Because at that point in time, obviously online shopping in India was taking off. And whenever online shopping, really takes off, obviously aggregators end up winning, because, everybody's trying to get eyeballs and, throwing out coupons left, right, and center so that, people come on your website, click to their website, and, it generates more revenue for them. So we were caught in that perfect storm. And obviously, then Times Internet came in, they bought us out. And, that was like my first exit, which I got to see firsthand. And that was a very unique company, because Coupon Dunia didn't raise any VC capital, nothing like that. It was, just basically completely led by Samir,
Correct.
with, a little bit of stake, handed around with a few other, few other people. But largely, it was completely driven by Samir, which was a very interesting way, obviously, back then, to build a company where most other people around you are raising, VC capital and going in a very different direction. Then obviously, Coupon, PharmEasy happened. So PharmEasy was very, very interesting. It was, I remember when I started PharmEasy, basically our biggest advantages there was the fact that, day zero at PharmEasy, we pretty much had, the early stage employees from Coupon Dunia join us at PharmEasy as well. So I was employee number 4 at Coupon Dunia, and I think employee number 5, 6, and 7, something like that, ended up joining us day zero at PharmEasy, right? And, you know, again, the power of team chemistry is so important because,
Correct.
it was almost as if, we just switched the location, but it felt like, we just continuing to work together. So the chemistry was just so high that we were executing at, light speed, because it was just everybody was so in tune, right? Everybody knew their job, everybody knew what the other person expected, how the other person worked. And that's such an unfair advantage to have, when you're doing an early stage company, because that trust, that chemistry, that, that in a way brain waves matching is so powerful that, we were like a rocket ship, right? So I think, within just a year of PharmEasy, I think we were doing, phenomenally well. Obviously, we had crazy product market fit. And I yet remember when we launched at PharmEasy, right? Uh, it was the MVP of all MVPs, right? So essentially, literally, the first time we launched at PharmEasy, there was 2 screens on the app. The first screen, which had a massive camera button on it, right? And, in big, letters, it was just written, take a snapshot of your, or take a prescription photo and get 20% off your order. People could take one photo, like users could take one photo, and on the next page, we were taking the phone number of the user. Like there was no place for the user to even put his name, no place for the user to even put his address, right? We only had a photo of a prescription and a mobile number to go off. That's it. That was the app, right? And we launched it, I think, in a matter of 3 or 4 hours, because the question really back then was, will people order medicines online, right? Because, it may seem, okay, now it makes sense, if you have a chronic illness like diabetes or something like that, it's something that, every month you're going to keep ordering and it's like a subscription thing. Obviously, that's a fact now. But back then, pretty much everybody was like, nobody's going to be ordering medicines online, right? Because when you think of medicines, you're sick now, you want the medicine now, right?
Correct.
And we actually discovered that ourselves, because in the orders that we were getting, even at the early stages, most of them were chronic illnesses like diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that, right? and we kind of optimized PharmEasy completely for that kind of subscription flow, because that's where we saw the LTV, was the highest from a customer standpoint. And secondly, that's where we felt we can really make a difference for that cohort of customers, right? Because they needed us the most. I mean, when you have, I don't know, cold, fever, etc. I mean, you may use PharmEasy as a one-off thing, but that's not really what PharmEasy was optimized for at that point in time. Yeah, so I mean, PharmEasy was going really well at the Series B stage. One of the things I kind of realized is that once you raise money, very very quickly, uh, entrepreneur mistake 101 is like you dilute a lot of your stake.
Correct.
Right? And I think by the time I kind of moved on, we had raised almost $100 million plus.
Nice.
And and that point in time, like I really asked myself the question that what do I really want to accomplish with my life, and what are my kind of goals. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to build something at massive scale, right? And what I mean by massive scale is really India kind of scale, or world scale. That was one of the ambitions I had. And back then I remember having early stage conversations with Hotstar, and Hotstar is super early stages that time, right? So
Okay.
it was led by Varun, who had just moved back from LA, to join Hotstar and head their engineering and their product team. He was one of the EVPs there. And he pretty much just told me this, that I want you to come in and build a world-class team here. You know Take all of the things that you've learned with PharmEasy and Coupon Dunia and just replicate the same thing here. Because back then when I joined, or was thinking about joining Hotstar, right, uh, Hotstar's entire product and tech was completely outsourced to Accenture. And this is one of the little known facts, I guess, and which is not kind of well publicized. But Hotstar's entire tech was completely outsourced, right? But kudos to them, and kudos to Varun and Ajit. They had the vision, and they had a very clear mindset that we cannot build a billion-dollar company, a tech company, without tech being outsourced.
Correct.
Right? And as obvious as that seems, it's not very natural for a media company. They were a media company first back then, to have that kind of belief and take on that task when it doesn't come first for the company. But that's where they were absolutely uncompromising, right? And kudos to them, where they literally just opened all the doors for me, right? They literally said, what, come in, think that there is no problem when it comes to capital. Just go out and build a world-class team, which can help us build a platform, which takes us to the next level, right? And over, I guess, roughly 18 odd months, we ended up, doing two huge things there, right? One is obviously we built like a 200 plus team members across product and engineering across, Bombay, Bangalore, and even, China. Because the kind of scale that we saw, we went from, when I joined, we were at 7 million monthly active users. By the time I exited, we were at 250 million monthly active users.
Oh.
Right? So very honestly, from an engineering standpoint and the kind of challenges that we saw, you didn't even know who to ask questions for, right? I mean, you couldn't hire people in India for sure. Even in the Valley, we did not find a company that we can benchmark and be like, what, that company would have seen this kind of scale. So let's, try and get some help or hire people from there. It was literally us trying to figure this stuff out with whatever we can understand, right? Because we were growing so fast. So just phenomenal time there. I mean, we broke literally world records when it came to concurrent users on a video stream, right? I remember there was a India Pakistan match where the last number of users on a concurrent stream live was around 7 odd million, which was the world record, and we got to, I think 9 or 10 million or something like that. And it was just insane, right? Like we had people from literally we had people from YouTube in our office, to see how we are delivering dynamic ads at that kind of scale, right? Because they were just there honestly to observe, right? Like nothing else, right? Which was just phenomenal. Like, and those days were so exciting. We used to actually, by the way, during all of these key events, we were all in office, right? Obviously watching the game, but more importantly, making sure, things don't go bad, right? Like, making sure everything kind of working perfectly. And a lot of people obviously keep complaining that the stream quality isn't the best. It should be like HD quality, things like that. But one of the things people really underestimate is what it takes to keep a stream even up with that kind of momentum of concurrent users hitting your servers. It's a very very different problem to kind of manage and take care of, right? And it was just crazy times. Obviously, like, phenomenal time there. Worked with some of the best people I've worked for. Worked in the industry there, really. And
Interesting.
obviously, then the big news happened where Disney came in and acquired Star, and of course with that they got the crown jewel, which was Hotstar. Hotstar obviously launched internationally. We launched in US, we launched in UK. I think now obviously maybe it's available in even more countries. Because now at this point in time, it's just like from a technology standpoint, it's like a box that we've created. And Star owns like majority a good amount of content, right, by default. So you can literally take this box and launch it in whatever country you want to, right? It's just a
Correct.
flick of a switch.
Right.
So it's very very modular in its construction. So it's very very powerful. It's insanely powerful as a platform. And obviously when this acquisition was happening, my entrepreneurial itch was acting up, and I really wanted to get back into the game. And one of the areas which I was super interested in, of course, was one of the reasons for me to get into what we are doing at Apollo. And a little bit of a backstory is, obviously I had I would say there were three fundamental reasons why I'm building what I'm building at Apollo, right? So
Right.
one is when I was at PharmEasy, right, and we were growing like absolutely crazy. One of the very obvious problems which I encountered was the fact that obviously we were raising money like left, right, and center in terms of equity capital, right? But our partner pharmacists, right, which actually had to scale up in order to serve the kind of demand that we were getting. They needed working capital loans, right? And these were guys who had gone from earning like 20,000-30,000 rupees a month in terms of profit, like pre-PharmEasy, to post-PharmEasy earning anywhere between 2 to 3 lakh rupees a month, right,
Wow.
in terms of profit, right? So it was life changing for them.
Correct.
And as with any marketplace, right, like some of these guys were really excited and wanted to go to the next stage, right, and wanted to serve more people, but they needed financial support, right? They needed working capital loans, things like that. And these guys were guys who had maybe 5-10 lakh rupees working capital, and for them a half a day's order used to be 5 lakh rupees, right? So it was just too much momentum, right? And one of the big things that we struggled with at PharmEasy was actually enabling working capital loans, for these guys from traditional lenders, because all of these guys, by the way, did not recognize this PharmEasy income, because they were just like, this is an online gig. PharmEasy's been around for a few years. Uh, we can't take this as a format of stable income. So basically that meant that these guys were not able to get access to any kind of formal credit just from a working capital perspective. And this just felt like crazy to me, because I mean, I remember thinking about this, that you know if PharmEasy is facing such problems with these kind of numbers and these kind of improvements, like literally a 10x of the profits, I'm not even talking about revenue, I'm talking about profits for these pharmacies. This problem is pretty much replicated, I'm sure, for everybody, right? Like if you're a seller on any internet company, right, you could be selling on Amazon, Flipkart, Zomato,
Correct.
Uber, wherever, right? You're going to have the same kind of ceiling which you're going to hit, that hey, you're working in an internet economy, and maybe you're not, that revenue is kind of not recognized. uh, it's silly, right? And of course after that, a lot of things have come to light, right, where even, I mean, I've heard like YouTubers who are earning like shit ton of money, they don't end up getting a credit card. A lot of these problems basically came to light. And to add insult to injury, when I was, and this is yet, I would say, is like a niche problem, but the large, which was like really the thing which hit me, which obviously now is very obvious, is that when I was working in Hotstar, one of the primary ways in which we made money, of course, was ads, right? So by default, we did a lot of demographic analysis. And one of the things which came out over there was the fact that pretty much only 100 million people are available on the credit bureaus. That means about 90% of India does not have access to any kind of formal credit. Uh,
Correct.
and this was just, to me, just felt insane, right? Because it just felt like what is the point of having, so many banks and so many NBFCs and everything like that, when basically you're ignoring the large chunk? Like, how is
Correct.
this
I
even a
agree.
solution, right? uh, and that's when I kind of, started thinking in my mind, okay, what is the solution to this, right? Because, like, I mean, clearly there is something fundamentally broken, right? I can't think of, there is not one thing you can do which will solve the whole problem, but there needs to be like a whole ecosystem approach here, right? And that's when the brain cells started going, crazy about, okay, how do you really solve the problem from the ground up? And how I started Apollo really, right, was I actually spent about 2 to 3 months actually interacting with almost close to 20 to 30 fintech founders, or whoever would actually take my call or meet me in person, to understand from them fundamentally what were the challenges they were facing in the industry, right? Because from a very macro level view, one thing was very clear, that traditional lenders cannot solve this problem, primarily because the branches model does not work. I mean, you can look at the balance sheet of any new banks which have come up, and you'll see one of the bleeding areas for them is branches, because physical branches just don't scale, and the average ticket size of a personal loan of a traditional lender is about a lakh, and those durations of the loans is like about year, 2 years, and things like that, and the processing fees is about 2.5-3%. The reason for that is because the cost of processing a loan for them is around 2.5-3,000 rupees, right? So, and majority of India actually does not need a 1 lakh rupee loan, right? They actually need sachet type loans, and it's very similar to how you think about the shampoo industry, right? Like, majority of the stuff that sells over there is 1 to 2 rupees sachets, right? Because that's what India can afford.
Right.
Similarly, like, when you think about majority of India, you can't give them a 1 lakh rupee loan because they will not be eligible for it. And even if somehow you give it to them, they will not be able to pay such heavy EMIs back. So actually, most of India just needs money to smoothen out their income, right? Like, they don't need some massive long term loans, right? For that, traditional lenders somehow will manage their shit, but they just need money to smoothen out those incomes, so that like, they are earning hand to mouth, right? And whenever there's an emergency or some accident which ends up happening, or some urgent money that they need, they just need money probably till the next paycheck, or like maybe 2-3 months, and they'll be fine, right?
Right.
um, so fundamentally, the question and the feedback which I got back after talking to so many fintechs and founders was, everything's amazing, right? Like, I mean, there's massive demand. There is, this market is just massively underpenetrated. But the biggest problem that they had was, literally, there was no, operating system, or no, kind of blanket default layer on top of which they could build, because every traditional guy that they talk to, or traditional lender that they talk to, was just, it honestly, well, they were not even ready to talk to them, firstly, because traditional guy was not interested in talking to fintechs which were early stage. And second is, even if they ended up talking to them, and magically decided and agreed to work with them, it would take 6 to 8 months to integrate with them, right? And that too, after that, it would be that, what, you have to dance to my tunes, because I am going to decide who I'm going to finally do lending to, without doing any kind of advanced machine learning, any kind of alternate data, nothing of that sort. So really, the frustration which was coming out of all the fintech founders is that, what's really the point of me doing this, right? Because in the end of the day, if the bank is going to continue giving out loans to the same 100 million people, so the TAM, or the target market, is not really going up. It's just
Right.
the same 100 million people. We are just sourcing it for you more efficiently. It's almost like I'm doing Google ads for you, right? I'm a digital marketer instead of a digital lender, right? So
Hmm.
this was such a fundamentally, like, important problem to solve, right? And one of the advantages that I had over there was, you know Apollo Finvest was a company which was started by my dad about 35 years or back, right? And so, for us, like, lending is, in a way, we've been doing this for 3 decades, right? And I had, obviously, Apollo Finvest right in my backyard. Uh, and that's when I started thinking, what if we basically built exactly the AWS version, but for digital lending, right? Where, you know, the dream situation, or, innovation really kickstarts when the barriers to entry become absolutely flat, right? Like, there should be zero barrier to entry. As much as you reduce the barriers to entry, you're going to have that many number of people attack the problem, and the problem then will eventually disappear, right? It's very similar to obviously AWS, very similar to the iOS app store, the Play Store, whatever you think of, right? When the barrier to entry becomes low, you're going to have many people attack the problem. So for the last 2.5 years, at Apollo, our number one focus really has been to reduce the barriers to entry in order for any company in India to start doing digital lending in India, right? And today, like, we're fortunate, like, we work with almost 30 to 40 fintechs in the country today, including the likes of, say, Flipkart, Tala, Avail Finance, Ancash, Nira, InstaMojo, Razorpay, Money on Click, Money Tap, all of these guys, right? Like, are working with us, and we're very fortunate to have them as partners. But our real big focus has been three fundamental things, right? One is, we want to take care of the compliance, regulation, and the license issues, right? So that, again, that's an area we don't want you to focus on at all. Leave that part of the work to us. So you just focus on building a fantastic consumer-facing app, really, amazing algorithms to do your underwriting, and finally focus on creating innovative ways for you to collect money from the customer. The second big piece that Apollo really takes care of, right, is the underlying operating system for digital lending, right? And what I mean by that is, again, compliance APIs, regulation APIs, eKYC APIs, your digital loan agreements, your access to credit bureaus, disbursement APIs, collection APIs, a loan management system as a SaaS software, right? So the way we think about this, right, this is nothing but a collection of APIs which are de facto or standard and needed for any digital lender, right? So in our opinion, this isn't something that people usually innovate on, right? There's nothing you can innovate on top of this, but this is kind of the base layer that everybody needs, right? And our goal and mission is that, as every month goes by, we keep making the base layer stronger and stronger, because we keep getting, obviously the community keeps building on the Apollo platform. Whenever we see amazing stuff that other people are doing, we just integrate it into our platform, so that obviously everybody else using the Apollo platform kind of benefits of additional features which maybe one person has added on. And we just pick out trends that we see, and we keep integrating it into our platform, so that for all fintechs and other community members which are using the Apollo Finvest platform, it just becomes as easy as flicking on a switch, right? Like recently we kind of integrated the Bharat bill payment system, right? So now it's super easy for a person who's using obviously the Apollo Finvest platform to collect their EMIs using an app like Paytm or Google Pay or whatever, anywhere where you typically think about in your mind to make bill payments. You can just send a link to a customer, without the customer even having your app. He clicks on the link, he probably will have the Paytm app, he probably have the Google Pay app, the Phone Pay app, whatever, right? It'll actually open up inside that, and he can make a payment. So things like this, right, which we think is not like something which one person will do separately. It's almost like a platform thing where everybody should be doing this kind of stuff. We've obviously enabled that. And finally, obviously we think about capital, right? So capital is super powerful. And what we do is, because we work with such a wide variety of fintechs, wherever we see opportunities where A, we understand what they're doing, and B, we see that what they're doing is really promising, they have good collections, and in general the unit economics make sense. Apollo actually comes in with its own capital and helps them scale up their lending operations as well, right? So really our mission with Apollo is to reduce the barriers to entry when it comes to digital lending, so that pretty much any company in India can start doing digital lending in India. Because one of the things we are very passionate about and very clear about really is that 10 years from today, right, if we are to basically enable access to formal credit in India, which is fundamentally important for the progress of the country, because everybody needs access to credit in order to build something and do something which is maybe slightly beyond their means, right? That's just the cold hard reality. So if this is to happen, this will not be done by one single company. It's not going to be a one guy dominates all. This business is going to have a massive long tail. And it needs a massive long tail, because that's how you're going to have an inclusive environment where people are serving different niches and solving problems at scale for majority of India, and not just 10% or 5% of India.
Right. No, very interesting because you went talking about your early journey with Coupon Dunia, Hotstar and PharmEasy, and your learnings from all these companies and how you plan to Apollo Finvest. I wanted to understand: are you looking at only helping out fintech companies, or are you also looking at marketplaces and other businesses where you very interestingly pointed out that most of them are servicing actually 100 million people only. But for now, are you only focusing on fintech companies and helping them create APIs, or are you also looking at other marketplaces or even offline companies as well?
That's a phenomenal question. So actually, I mean, our question, or our thought process regarding the definition of fintech is actually very different. So I kind of make this mistake always by calling, fintechs. But what I mean by fintechs, right, is actually like, my definition of fintech is going to be in such a way where, probably over the next 10 years, every company will be a fintech. And the reason why I feel this, right, is because basically, let's see the trends which are going on across the world, right? You're seeing Amazon launch their own, Amazon has had their own credit card for like years now. Apple has launched their own credit card. Google is apparently going to come out with their own neobank. Uber, I know, is working on, it's all over the news. Uber is working on their own neobank of sorts. What's to stop Zomato to build a neobank for, restaurants, right? What's to stop Uber, or Ola doing the same thing for their set of the, blue collar workers that they kind of work with, right? So to me, the definition of a fintech is going to be very, very different because in my opinion, I'm very fairly confident that over the next 10 years, most companies and the way I describe it is whether you're an online or offline company, right? It actually doesn't matter. The only reason why today Apollo focuses on online companies is because it's low hanging fruit, right? It's easier for me to do that because I have access to that ecosystem. But over the long horizon of time, you're absolutely right. This is not something which is going to be restricted to, online businesses. In fact, I feel the tail is going to be even longer for offline businesses because that's majority of India, right? Majority of India is not online. Majority of India is offline businesses. So, they are going to adopt these things. And, any company, like I always say this internally in the company, right? Like where our goal as Apollo is just to spread awareness. Like that's all we do. Like Apollo's goal, and our mission over the next 5 years is just to spread awareness that something like this does exist. So if you are thinking about, basically starting to distribute your own financial services, you can do that using our plug and play platform, right? Where you don't have to have engineering skills. You don't have to have, 10, 20 engineers or know how to code, right? That's something which we've taken care of. You just go out and do the best thing you can, right? Which is, just figure out who's your customer base, what's your advantage when it comes to collections, and you kind of focus on those things. But for us, every company which has a transaction happening, right, is going to be a financial services company over the next 10 years. And the reason is the following, right? Number one, and the easiest reason I can say is the fact that it is a profit center, right? Today, imagine if you're Apple, right? And you are working with so many companies where people are coming in and buying an iPhone at 0% EMI, where Apple is kind of doing a part of the subvention. Apple will just be like, what, why am I paying Bajaj Finserv this much money when I know that Bajaj Finserv basically takes away the clean customers, right? And the customers who I feel, I would love for Bajaj Finserv to actually finance because that should really increase my sales. Bajaj Finserv basically says no, right? Because pretty much the whole world knows Bajaj Finserv's philosophy is basically if you have 750 plus CIBIL score, which is basically creme de la creme, that's when you get, access to credit from Bajaj. And that's the reason why their NPAs are world class, right? But I think people are waking up and smelling the coffee and saying that, what, everybody's margin is my opportunity, right? So people are not going to sit idly by and, let you earn crazy amount of money when they're going to start realizing what you're doing, which is basically their best customers you're giving credit to, and the customers that you really wish got credit to, they're not getting them. So, and today there is nothing that they can do about it, right? Because you can't go and push Bajaj Finserv to give more credit to your customers because Bajaj Finserv is the biggest guy out there. There's no competition. So eventually what's going to start happening And we are ourselves in conversations with some of the massive or top 3 smartphone manufacturers in India, who have made it very clear that, listen, like we need to be, we need to be there when it comes to financing and at the checkout points of our maybe online stores, even offline stores, because we're not happy with the kind of service that we're getting, from the traditional guys out there. And we need to have, a gun in this battle, right? We just can't be like, okay, treat our customers however, because I'm spending millions of dollars on marketing. And imagine the customer coming there and finally deciding, I'm going to buy this 20,000 rupee phone, but Bajaj Finserv saying, sorry, I'm going to approve only 5% of your customers. That's just a very, very bad funnel, right? So you're going to see this across the board, right? Right from maybe Flipkarts of the world, Amazons of the world. You're going to see this offline, obviously, with traditional, or I would say, traditional businesses who you don't associate with, financial services, get into financial services because they just have no other. I mean, number one, obviously, they'll make a lot more money. Second is that they have data about the customer, and actually they are in a better position to underwrite the customer than probably Bajaj Finserv, right? Especially when you think about the likes of, payment gateways, right? When you think about the likes of, Razorpay, when you think about InstaMojo. By the way, this is already happening in US with Square Capital, right? So Square obviously is very similar to Razorpay, essentially in a way in India, and Square has started offering capital as, to MSMEs, right? And the reason why they're starting offering loans to MSMEs is because, if you're an offline store and, in US, obviously there's a high amount of transactions which happen digitally. They're able to understand the business model of the guy. They're able to understand average amount of revenue that this guy earns. And according to that, they themselves power the loan to, the merchant, right? And this is so important because obviously, Square has access to that kind of data. But secondly, it makes the customer even more sticky, because the customer and the merchant will think, 1,000 times before switching away from Square now, because he'll be like, Square is just not like some processing, hardware which I'm using to process digital payments. It's actually my partner, because it's like almost like my partner bank in a way, which is providing me access to credit. And if I shut off Square, probably I'm going to lose my access to, even a loan, right? Which is helping me scale up my business. And lastly, honestly, there is no other option, right? I mean, as much as we can debate, there is no other option. And as I found out at PharmEasy, and I'm sure many online companies are finding out today, you may raise millions of dollars, hundreds of million, $200 million, but when you want to scale up your platform, your merchants need access to capital, because if they don't have access to capital, they just can't do the sale because they don't have the inventory. And if it is your problem to figure out capital for them, if you want to scale up your business, right? And I think that's where you're going to see, companies like a Zomato, companies like an Uber, companies like an Ola, Swiggy, all of these guys, right? They are, some of them we know are figuring out capital, and whoever is not is going to be figuring out capital, because it is such a massive opportunity, and at the same point in time, it is such a massive problem to solve.
Correct. No, it's very, very interestingly put out. I think someone mentioned that every company wants to be a bank. So I think Apollo Finvest is trying to solve that problem for even online and offline companies. But Nikhil, I wanted to understand, since we are in the midst of COVID-19, do you think consumer behavior and spending will change after COVID-19? Obviously, the Indian corporates never thought we employees could work remotely, but it's finally happened. But what are the consumer behavior and spending do you think might change once this COVID-19 thing gets over?
So I think, talking a little bit on the fintech side of things, right? Like I think, at least, what I expect over the next, 12 odd months is the following, right? I think, number one thing I expect is basically, and we're seeing this already in the fintech space. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation happening, or a lot of companies shutting down, right? Primarily because, the problem essentially is right now that I think almost 20 to 25% of the fintech digital lending companies will be in trouble at this point in time, just because of the moratorium and how, it's been made out. It's 6 months, right? It's very, very difficult for, companies to withstand that kind of, especially digital lending companies, to withstand that kind of, lack of repayments coming in for a certain amount of time. because a lot of them do end up giving guarantees to lenders, right? When they're kind of using their capital to lend, and it's very difficult for them to sustain those guarantees because all of those agreements have certain clauses, which means that the lender can come in and be like, you know what, I need my capital back beyond a certain amount of date, which is going to lead to a lot of consolidation or probably companies just shutting down, right? So that's the number one thing. So that's the negative side of things. The positive side of things, right, is that like the biggest thing that we've been telling all of our partners, right, is that just survive, right? Just survive, because if you do survive, right, you are going to see exponential tailwinds in this space, because the demand is going to be sky high, right? And the traditional lenders are going to be, are going to be busy sorting out their own, rubbish in their books, right? The mess which has happened, they're going to be busy sorting out their own mess. Now, one of the advantages of being like a digital lender is by default, you're small, because, you've been active, this industry is like 5-6 years old, right? So you're not that big, and there are many ways by where that's a con, but there are many ways that's a pro as well, right? So you have less scrap to sort out, right? So if you have less scrap to sort out, the opportunity really now is that how do you make a play for attracting customers on your platform, which traditionally you would never have got access to, because they would have gone to traditional lenders or traditional banks. And not only do you provide credit to super credit worthy customers which would before not come to you and today are coming to you because traditional lenders have just dried up credit, but most importantly, the good and smart fintechs will figure out, okay, not only this, we don't want to make this a one-time thing, right? Where in 12 months, again, this customer disappears. The right fintechs today will be thinking of a platform play where, I'm attracting the customers coming to me right now because, there is this very limited access to credit outside from the traditional guys. But the real question to ask and the real problem to solve is how do you keep him engaged, beyond just credit, right? Because I mean, fundamentally, the good customers, they're just not going to keep, taking loans from you every month, right? That's just a cold hard reality, because if a customer is taking loans from you every single month, it's actually a bad customer, right? There's going to be a situation where one point or the other, he's going to overburden himself and be in trouble. So fintechs will need a strategy where you're just not, lending is not everything. You need to think of, other ways in which you keep him engaged on your platform so that he returns to you, often, right? So that you're part of his life cycle and not just, a requirement which he fulfills, say, once every 2 years, right? Um, so that's going to be a very interesting opportunity. But, the takeaway here is, if you survive this hurdle, you are going to get access to a massive market, which is with reduced competition, with access to customers, which before you would never have been able to access before. And you must maximize on that opportunity and use this downtime to figure out a strategy of how, you're going to be super powerful when these factors are in play, right? The third thing is, when you think about traditional lenders, right? Like I already hinted at it before, but they're going to be a little bit of a mess right now internally, and we're already seeing all kinds of news coming out with all of the very very traditional lenders being little bit in little bit or I'm being kind when I say little bit, but there's a lot of problems that they're kind of figuring out right now, and there's going to be a very very weak market from them when it comes to lending over the next 12 to probably 18 months, right? And the reality, what people need to understand is that it's not about COVID-19, just COVID-19. It's actually been happening. If you look at the last 2 years, there's been a lot of mess, right? Especially in the in the lending slash digital lending world. Before this, we had the IL&FS crisis. Then there's been a lot of mucking about going around with what is eKYC, what is not eKYC. Leaving a lot of we talk about startups quite a lot, right? But the reality is there are a lot of very very large companies which are traditional companies set up with the whole concept of eKYC because they thought that would bring about a lot of cost reductions, and that has taken forever to resolve, right? So a lot of money has already been lost in one line, right? Now it's going to take a lot for the traditional lenders to get back on their feet. So what my expectation is with this whole work from home thing is the fact that risk is going to be super tight, But one again massive opportunity that I see for, again, and this is for fintech third party service providers, not digital lenders per se, is that traditional lenders are going to be looking for digital tools to do their existing workflows in a much more efficient manner. So they don't really want to take extra risk, right? In fact, they want to take lesser risk. But their existing workflows, they want to optimize, maybe when it comes to cost, maybe when it comes to time, maybe honestly just forcing the issue to do that digitally, right? Because you're not sitting in the office and doing it, right? That's a huge opportunity, right? I mean, there's an opportunity to reimagine a loan management system. There's an opportunity to reimagine the credit engine, right? Make it all cloud first, make it accessible remotely. Because a lot of these guys, by the way, when they work, right, they have on-premise software which is just not suited for working from home, because it's they access it through remote computers, etc., etc. It's super slow. It's a bit of a mess, right now. And if you are a fintech service provider, right, where you're building software for fintechs, it's a fantastic time, because now you can actually go in and offer that software to traditional lenders. Yes, you have to make sure that it's really powerful from a security standpoint, compliance standpoint, and a regulatory standpoint, because you're selling to enterprise individuals. But that's the massive opportunity, right? So I think you have to, with every, I think there's a very famous quote which says, right, every time there's chaos, there's opportunity, right? So every problem is an opportunity. And obviously in these current gloomy times, it's very easy to just become like, oh my God, it's depressing and things are, we're at the end of the world. But the reality is that, if you take the opportunities which come your way, you will be much better for it, 10 years from today, because you would have, I mean, we are seeing something which is happening, which happens once in 100 years, right? So we have to take this as an opportunity to be much more resilient and just learn from whatever we are doing, right? I mean, honestly, what else can you do, right? Either you can just be like, you know what, I can't help it, this is just so screwed up. Because the other aspect of everything, right, is, and this is something which nobody talks about for some strange reason, but the reality is there's a huge psychological burden and emotional burden that we are all going to have to deal with, by the way, very, very soon, right? Because, this whole concept of social distancing and staying at home and, all of this kind of stuff, it's just not a problem of actually work. It's going to create a problem of motivation. And because fundamentally, human beings are social creatures, right? So the reality is, if you're just working from home and you really can't go out and enjoy and, do something which is so, human, which is socially interact with each other, I think, companies and, frankly, everybody's going to have a problem of just motivating their own troops to work. Because eventually people are just going to be like, why am I working so hard? What's the point, right? Because I can't enjoy anything, right? What's the point of me doing really, really well at work, maybe earning, a lot of money, but I can't do anything with it, right? So those are, going to be like a big challenge, which all companies have to figure out a way to solve.
Right. Interesting. And I wanted to understand: are there new areas in fintech like mobile banking for underserved, peer-to-peer lending, insurance? That's something very interesting. A lot of people don't look at insurance, but you already talked about micro loans and lending. Where do you see the biggest opportunities going forward for founders who want to get into this space?
Oh, absolutely. So I would say that, Apollo is building the AWS for digital lending, right? So I see, similarly, I would love to see a company build the AWS for mutual funds, right? I would love to see the, company build the AWS for insurance, right? I mean, honestly, the whole thing is like a white space, right? Because, I think, best way to build a company, right, is to just imagine what the future looks 10 years from today, right? And fundamentally, like, it's predicting the future, right? So I mean, I think everybody has to read the tea leaves, make a bet, and then build a part of the future that you feel you're best suited to build. So right now, no doubt about it, I feel like there is a massive opportunity when it comes to building these two particular huge verticals in their own way. But I'm very biased, but I genuinely feel like India needs a lot more infrastructure companies, right? Because almost like every single company I've been a part of over the last 10 years, right? I've seen, I've seen repetitive softwares being built individually inside companies, right? Which to me is a massive lost opportunity, waste of time, doesn't make sense at all, right? So, I mean, honestly, the easiest way for a founder who's thinking about starting something, right, is honestly the best path is usually to work inside a fintech company for a certain amount of time, see what's happening, see the stuff which your company is spending time building tools over, and if you think that's a general purpose use case and there is a good chance that it is, just build that software out and just hand it out across, build a SaaS software, right? And the beautiful thing about SaaS essentially is if you get it right, you can actually scale it worldwide, right? Because there are problems that you can solve on a global level, or at least for multiple countries, if not on a global level. And those are opportunities where I would really love for entrepreneurs and fintechs in general to focus on, because once there is amazing infra to build on top of, and once the barriers to entry become so low, and by default people are operating on a certain standard, right, on standard amazing software, the kind of innovation that's going to unleash, and just the strength of it, right, is going to be phenomenal. Because right now it yet feels like we are in day zero of fintech in many ways, where everybody's kind of just building the basics and getting up to a point where you know now we can really attack, right? I think we're not at that point, and it's going to take like maybe 12 months, 24 months, maybe 3 years for us to get to that point, because that's how good your OS really needs to be, right? And once your OS is there, right, and I mean we are there in terms of that's why I love companies like Razorpay is a fantastic company, right? They're building like world class infra, right? And that's so powerful because now nobody has to really think about payment gateways, right? You think about payment gateway, you think about Razorpay, right? That's a solved problem. So many of these kind of examples we need in the industry, right? So that if this is out there, I think just the standards of this infra is so high, then you can build really amazing stuff on top of it.
Interesting. And before the call, we talked about cryptocurrencies, but what are your thoughts on legacy businesses? And I know cryptocurrency could be a taboo topic, but do you think cryptocurrencies can disrupt legacy businesses or legacy banks? What are your thoughts
on that? Very honestly, so I mean, my take on crypto is I feel like it's just crying out for a use case right now. I think that's something which must be cracked hopefully sooner rather than later, right? I mean, let me put it this way, right? Conceptually and theoretically, right, the way cryptocurrency is built is, if you ask any technologist at heart, they will always say that this is how money should work, right? Where transferring money from, I mean, I've just faced so many problems myself being in this space that I wish we would just take some of the principles at least of cryptocurrency and apply it to fiat currency. Like the other day, the craziest thing happened, right? Like I mean, and this is just just comes to the top of my mind, where we had one of our one of the companies which are in one of the fintechs which are there in the US, and they're setting up operations in India, and they're using our software, right? So they were paying us whatever a fees etc. to set it up, and they did a transfer, and they do a transfer into our HDFC bank account, and basically HDFC ends up blocking that transfer, right?
Yeah.
Because like, why is this coming in? What's happening? Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, how? I mean, what is the problem, right? I mean, it's not like I'm getting a transfer from some random company. This is a company which is funded by top tier VCs in the world, right? This is not some random. I can understand if it's some random company, right? It's like a Series B company which has raised like $100 million plus. You can literally Google about them, and you'll see 25 links about them. But these kind of things which happen, the other day again, like I have my sister who's in London, and I wanted to do a transfer to her, from my account to her. And by the way, at least to my knowledge, HDFC pretty much told me that if you have to do this transfer, you need to physically sign up a form.
Correct.
And come to a branch and make it happen. Like I have to go to a branch. Apparently there was no online way in which they could support me. And this is like 2 weeks ago, right? Which just felt absurd, because I'm like, now basically you're telling me that because there's a virus going out outside, you're basically telling me you can't transfer money to who you want to. Like, what's the point of it being my money if I can't do these things? And I can understand we need obviously some kind of, frameworks, so that, we're preventing, money laundering, and we're preventing, money being transferred to terrorists and all of that stuff, right? But, it can't be a situation where we're treating everybody as a terrorist, right? Because we just don't want money to come to terrorists, right? So yeah, of course, when it comes to crypto, I think what's going to end up happening over a long horizon of time, right, is that I think it's a space which definitely needs patience. But I do hope, while we are giving that space patience, I do hope, the right guys in the room are, paying attention to, the underlying things that crypto really solves for. And, whether crypto becomes a reality or not, I do hope that we do adopt some of the principles, so that it just makes money a lot more easier, right? It's unnecessarily complicated today, where it just shouldn't be this way, right? It shouldn't be this way, where, in order for me to transfer money to my own family or to my friends, or to, to do any of this stuff, I have to jump through thousands of hoops, and, take approvals from banks who have nothing to do with my money, right? Like, I mean, and this is just a pure consumer view, right? I'm sure there are many people who will contest and tell me that, the rules are there for a reason. Of course they're there for a reason, right? I'm not stupid. But, can we do better is the question, right? Can we have a better benchmark, right? Like,
Right.
those are questions we need to answer.
Correct. Nikhil, I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
So one of my favorite business books is, Shoe Dog, right? So yeah, that book should be a movie, right? That's the best thing I can say. It's a lovely read. It's a lovely read.
Yeah. And, if you could go back in time when you started working on startups and started working on Apollo Finvest, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
Well, I've been doing this now for 10 years. So one of the advantages is that, majority of the mistakes I could have made, I have already made and, suffered for them. So I'm at least hoping I make little less mistakes now than I did, 10 years back. But, you never know. But I think, if I talk about, in general, right, like, and I keep saying this, to myself, because, this is very important, I feel, right? Like, I think, the power of compound interest is very, very powerful. And, the message here really is that, have high levels of perseverance, because in this world we are kind of, I think everybody's becoming acclimatized to getting instant gratification, right? Like, you want instant success, you want everything, like, you build a software, you want instant sales. Like, that's really become, and that's a fault. I mean, I think even I do have, right? I mean, like, this is a thing I've seen across the industry, where people just give up too quickly, or they just want too many things too quickly. So I think one of the things which I constantly tell myself, right, is that, believe in the power of compound interest. Be in a space, for a long amount of time, to really build a career in it, to have real insights in it, you know, to have unfair advantages, right? Um, this is something which I really kind of nowadays I've been kind of, psyching myself up to, that, keep doing what you're doing, build stuff, and eventually the power of compound interest will come back and, give you all the interest that, you've been working towards.
It's like a 100-year journey. Um,
Yeah.
and what's your favorite online tools? Example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom.
Oh, so one of the ones which I've been, using the hell out of right now is Superhuman,
Wow.
right? Yeah, like, I mean, huge fan, of that. You know, it's just so powerful, right? I mean, in one line, it just saves me so much time. I cannot, stop recommending it, to be honest. Uh, if you are a person which gets a lot of emails and needs to be on the top of it, and uh, you know, uh, Superhuman is something which is really powerful way for you to manage your emails. And just the speed of that software, my God, like, whoever, I mean, Rahul is obviously the founder there, and I think he's done like a bang up job of it, right? Like, it's just, like, it's a software I just admire for many reasons.
Right. Yeah. Now, email has not been disrupted for a long time. Let's hope Superhuman is really able to take it to the next level. Mikhail, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Apollo Finvest?
Yeah, I mean, so I am available on Twitter. So, my handle is @Nikhil Inani. I'm sure you can just put it in, maybe the description of the video. And, uh, you know, to know more about Apollo, you can just go on apollofinvest.com. We have a blog section there, which we keep updating actually every, 2 months or 3 months with just in general insights that we see in the fintech space. We've written an article recently about what we expect, in detail about how COVID-19 is going to, impact fintechs and what we expect in the future. And in general, we write about, some of the things that we are building at Apollo, and, what our learnings are really in this space. So do check that out. That's where you can find information about me.
Correct. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking your time. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and you have some great insights about the fintech opportunities out there in India. Best of luck to you.
Loved it. Pleasure being there on the show.